excited to have special guest Mike Drucker.
Welcome.
Welcome, former Nintendo employee, but that is not your greatest credit. You're also someone that has worked on Saturday Night Live, The Today Show, and also
The Tonight Show.
I'm sorry,
that's a very different thing. The Today Show's not funny.
The Today Show's not funny at all. Why did I say that? The Tonight Show is much more funny, but most importantly, you worked on the localization for Zelda and Kid Icarus at Nintendo in the Treehouse.
Thank you. You've earned our respect already.
Snaps to you.
Yes.
But most recently, you have written a very good and very funny book that we've both been reading called Good Game, No Rematch. So congratulations. And you're going to be here. We're going to be chatting about all sorts of stuff, all sorts of former Nintendo stuff, and just picking your brain on your experience there and what you got up to, and also this great book that you've written. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, folks.
Yeah, it's this interesting thing that we had a couple years of overlap working at Nintendo of America, but I don't think we have had an in-person conversation until now.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why'd you avoid us?
I think because while I was at Nintendo, I was just... Because I was only there for 2 or 3 years, so I think half the time I was like, just don't make them mad at me. Just do what they... and it's such a nice place to work, but I was like, I don't want to lose this.
You were walking on eggshells.
Right. I mean, God, the one time I played... I mentioned this in the book, but the one time I played basketball with Reggie and was on his team and passed to the wrong person was maybe top 10 terrifying moments in my life.
But you weren't the one that whacked him in the nose and gave him a bloody nose, right?
No, that I would
hard
never
to come
live
back
that
from
down.
that.
Hard?
Yeah.
Is that guy still around?
Look out.
I feel like if I had done that, I would have broken my hand rather than his nose. I feel like he's such a solid, built of steel man.
Stone jaw.
His face is made of metal, like a Terminator or something.
People don't realize he's big.
Oh my gosh, he's really big, and I'm really small, so that was just not a good. It was very much this kind of situation where I'm always like, "Hi, Reggie." But yes, that is a funny thing that they used to do, that he used to do with people at Nintendo, is play these pickup basketball games. I cannot believe he got roped into this, but that was a thing that he would do all the time with the staff there. And it's like, oh yeah, we've been playing basketball with Reggie, or we're on the soccer field with whoever. It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
It's just a day in the life.
Extracurriculars.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've talked to a couple people who have written books before, and they've always told us, this is the most painful process I have ever been through. I can't believe I did this. Don't do this. So, did somebody talk you into this, or why did you decide to do it?
Well, I mean, the reason I decided to do it was actually during the writer's strike in 2023, the Writers Guild of America strike. And I couldn't pitch a TV show. I couldn't pitch a movie. But, obviously books are not covered under the entertainment industry's contracts. So I was like, you know what? I want to write something. I'm going to write a book. So I talked to my agent, who was, I'm lucky enough to be represented by a large agency that also has a book division. So they got me a book guy, and we talked. And of my various ideas, the one that they really liked was this book about video games. They were like, we know that you know this. We know that you're the person who could write this. Let's focus on that. So I wrote up a pitch and we sold it to HarperCollins. So it was sort of the situation itself of me just really wanting to work and really wanting to be creative, but also it was a good chance for me to talk about video games, which is the thing I think I like the most.
Yeah, I think that you're very versed in writing. Obviously, that this is sort of the core of your job and what you've been doing for so many years. But was it different, writing a book and then also putting so much personal stuff in here, your personal experiences? Was that something that was a bit of a different experience for you?
It was a different experience just in the sense that, unlike writing an essay or even writing stand-up when I do stand-up comedy, you have a word count you have to hit, and it's a long word count. And they're not mean about it. They're not like, if you don't get $80,000 words, we're going to take all the money back. It's not like that. It's much more along the lines of you being like, all right, I told this story. It is 700 words. That is nowhere near enough for this story. And it's not like you pad it out, but you're like, all right, I have to go back and think about it. How do I make it funnier? How do I add more details? And on the flip side, talking about, writing about yourself, this also applies to stand-up, where you sometimes get nervous about things. You have to be vulnerable. I talk about my family's problems when I was a kid in the book, and I wanted to both be honest, but also be sensitive. I wanted it to be, a good portrayal of growing up in sometimes a rough time, but I didn't want it to be like me taking swings at my family via book. And so you really do have to think about that stuff, because you're really, writing about something personal to you, or even writing about, my time at Nintendo. I wanted to be respectful to the company because the company was respectful to me. I wanted to also, like, I think Nate didn't love that I called him the most handsome man at Nintendo.
Why? I would be elated if someone called me the most beautiful person at Nintendo. Jeez.
But we were at Dice earlier this year in Vegas, and he was like, "Did you need to go with handsome?" And I was like, "Yes, you are a very handsome man, Nate Bildorf. I'm sorry."
But I love that. I love that part in the book where you're like, the other handsome person is now working on.
We
Destiny,
know who you're talking about.
And then I immediately was like, "Oh yeah, good choice."
Yeah. I was not wrong. Someone brought up a third person, which we could both think of, and I was like, no, he thought he was attractive, which made him less attractive.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Who I'm talking
because
about.
Right before we started recording, Kit goes, "Why isn't this person called out as a handsome person?" And I was like, "That's amazing,
yes.
Amazing."
Not knowing you're handsome makes you more handsome.
I see.
Okay,
exactly.
Those are just the rules.
Yes, keep it breezy.
So you were at Nintendo in the early 2010s and worked on so many great things. You were part of the Treehouse in the localization team, and we worked with the Treehouse closely. A couple times, got to go inside the Treehouse, but like for the people who don't know, like what is it truly like inside those sealed, locked doors?
Truly locked, like literally locked.
First of all, I mean, the Nintendo building, as you folks know, because I started working at Nintendo right when that new building opened, which is now, I guess, 15 years old. But when I worked there, it was like brand new, so it smelled new. And I had never lived in the Pacific Northwest, which I think is actually the most beautiful part of the country. And I grew up in Florida, which is not an ugly part of America, but like looking out a window and just seeing like pine trees as far as the eye could see was so nice. It was honestly like the kingdom of heaven. Like there was a shelf that had every Nintendo Power up to the end of the magazine. I had free access to these giant binders of like basically just style guides for these games. But when you're a nerd, you're like, I want to look up how big Bullet Bill is and how big he must be in every game. Yeah. Like it's kind of cool. It was so cool and it was so nice. I mean, like, as far as an office goes, if someone's trying to imagine it, just imagine like a normal open office layout, but very nice with a lot of nice views.
Yeah, I remember when they opened that new office, we were so jealous because we were, in the remote office in the Bay Area, but we got, obviously we were in Redmond a lot. And yeah, it is like a very classy kind of like understated modern office, but it had all these little cute Nintendo touches. I think in the book you mentioned like, oh, I saw a silhouette of Donkey Kong. It made me so happy. They have the office divided into these quadrants.
Yeah.
I believe the Nintendo Treehouse is in the Yoshi quadrant.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, you would go to where the Treehouse is and it's basically this door and you have to have special access.
Yeah.
To get into it. So you guys are kind of locked away, honestly, from the rest of us.
The riffraff.
Yeah, I know. They didn't want to let us in. These
normal human beings.
No-gooders. And I feel like, you kind of had like a very close-knit team behind those locked doors because that's kind of all you were having access to.
Yeah.
Not like they were like locking you guys in there or anything like that, but you guys just kind of shared a special, kind of a more special bond because of how secretive the Treehouse was. Did you get that sense? Did you feel that way?
I definitely got the sense that it was like secretive, and it was sort of a good bonding department because, like I mentioned, like even when you're working on one game, you'll be brought into meetings for another where you're pitching enemy names and, area names or literally anything that you might pitch on for a game, or the swear filter, which was always super fun to make. But like, so you were rarely siloed. You were rarely just working on your own game. Even if you weren't working on someone else's game, like I remember being asked like, hey, can you look at this section of, the Golden Sun game that they were doing on DS and like what you think of this? And it wasn't like a playtest thing. It was more like writers and producers sort of giving each other feedback on things and, taking a temperature check on something, because when you spend all day working on localizing a game, sometimes you lose sight of it, or you don't know if something's funny anymore or not, or if a scene's working. So it was really, even when I wasn't working on someone else's game, I still felt like I was collaborating with them on it. And so you really did feel like it was a team. It really did foster a really great team atmosphere in there.
It's interesting that you mentioned, and you mentioned it in your book, the great views out of the treehouse to see the Pacific Northwest. And I remember that was kind of a controversial thing when that building was being made, of like, oh, the treehouse is working on the top secret stuff. Maybe they shouldn't have windows at all. And I remember the upper hand in that debate was NCL's got windows.
Oh,
Can't really argue with that.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, that is.
It just puts you all in a dark basement. Shut up and write.
Underground.
If NCL's doing it, we can do it too.
Exactly.
Unless NOE gets in the way.
Trump all argument is NCL did it.
Yeah,
NCL did it.
That always works.
Yeah.
So glad that you mentioned Nate Baldorf. And yes, he is very handsome, but to us, he's always like the unsung hero. And these days, he is like large and in charge, like big boss, Mr. Executive.
Mr. VP, EVP.
Right. But we're like,
yeah,
he really is like the embodiment of everything that is good and special about this company. Can you just talk a little bit? Can we just gush about him for a second?
Yeah.
I'm going to love this.
He was the guy that interviewed me on the phone when I was first interviewing for the job, and I did not think I'd get the job. So I just sort of like was like, hey, it's just nice to talk to Nate Baldorf. Like, I was just like, when I got that interview, I didn't even think that I'd get it. I was just like, oh, it's cool. I've heard of this guy. He Paper Mario. And so he's super nice. He's super friendly, but he's also, one, he's a great writer. So he's not like, a suit that's coming in to run a team of translators and writers and localization specialists. He's someone who's worked in the trenches and worked his way up. So he really respects the medium. He respects the company, and he knows the company well. And he has this quality that I would say is he loves and respects the company, but he's not blind to it. So he's somebody who always wants to improve it. He wants the games to be better and better. He's not just someone who's like, well, we're Nintendo, and that's why. Like, he always felt like he was working hard, even when Nintendo could sometimes be oblique, as we know. When NCL might not necessarily be giving you all the information on Earth, he still felt like someone who was working very hard to make sure everyone could do their job as well as possible.
Yeah, he always struck me as someone that was very honest.
Yeah.
And he would oftentimes be the person in the room that was like, let's call out this thing that's not working and try to fix it versus like, let's just, kind of sweep it under the rug or pull the wool over our eyes or something like that. So I always appreciated that about him. And he's extremely talented as well. And I also fangirled out when I met Nate Builder for the first time. I was like, oh, Paper Mario.
Yeah.
And recently Kit and I were kind of lamenting about, oh gosh, Nate used to be sort of more so involved in the day-to-day of the writing. And to your point, he is a writer and was in the trenches with you guys. So he has that experience. And now Nate is like the big boss guy, and he's very busy. And I'm sure he's being pulled into all sorts of ridiculous meetings all the time. And his time is very limited now. And we were kind of lamenting like, oh gosh, that era of writing with kind of Nate at the helm at Nintendo, is it gone? Because the last Mario and Luigi game, Mario and Luigi Brothership, we both played it, and we were like, this game is not funny at all. In fact, this is lame. And we were kind of thinking like, is it because Nate's the boss now? Is it because he's not there, like heading up that team anymore? That's a very sad reality if that's the case. What do you think about that?
I mean, I know it's tough. Like, I do know that like there are, and Nate's not the only one. I know that there are a couple, people there that are more senior producers now who used to be more in the writer roles who wish they had that time to do the writing because they really loved it. So I think that probably has some effect on it, that you're not having like, one of the greatest localization writers the English language has ever seen working on, that game. That said, when you don't know what happened behind the scenes with Brothership, I don't want to make too many assumptions because you also never know who asked for what and where got when wide. But yeah, I definitely wish Nate had the time and the ability to like really do those games again because he was so good at it. That said, it does benefit the team to have someone who's such a great writer and who does respect translators and writers and editors that much, because at least you have somebody who's fostering that talent. And, Brothership, I do kind of agree, was a bit of a miss. But at the same time, I do think that if you're going to have someone that has to be the leader, Nate is not a terrible choice for that. He's a pretty great choice for that.
Yeah.
And we have gotten that specific question from our community before of like, what is the process for making a game that is funny? And I would love to get your take on this as somebody who worked on Kid Icarus, and you noted like Mr. Sakurai had the intention of like, let's make this game funny.
Yeah.
Do you need people who are inherently funny, have kind of a history with comedy to achieve this? Is it kind of a different skill set versus a different kind of game?
I wouldn't say that you have to be like naturally funny for it, but you do want to kind of be funny. I mean, it would be no different than if if you were hiring someone to localize, let's not say Legend of Zelda, let's say it's a new role-playing game by Nintendo, something that's more Fire Emblem-y, that requires a lot of drama and a lot of purple prose and a lot of epic dialogue. If you have someone who's never really experienced the fantasy genre before or doesn't know what like an epic type role-playing game's like, it might come off weird. And comedy is kind of the same way. If you have no joke writing experience or joke telling experience, sometimes it can feel wooden because you're kind of going off what you think you're supposed to do rather than what you've done in the past or you sort of learned to do. And, you know, it's not always easy to do. Like in the case of Uprising, a lot of the directions we'd get would be like, you know, I'd work with my translator on the project, and I was also with, you know, there was another writer and translator team. And we'd get the direct translation and we'd talk about what the meaning of the joke was and what the emotion behind that was. You know, is Pitt trying to make fun of a character? Is he trying to be sarcastic? Is he trying to elicit a response from Palatina or something? And then we'd try to build from there to make a joke about that. But you really do kind of need to know how to structure a joke. You need to know how to have the context and the punchline and make it quick, especially for something like Uprising where it was one-liner, and not like a sketch. So I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I think it really does make it easier and it really helps the quality when you at least do.
Does Mr. Sakurai have a future career doing stand-up? Is that a thing? Do they do stand-up comedy in Japan?
Do they?
Yeah, okay. Because we saw him, he became an expert YouTube creator and got hundreds of thousands. Like, what can't this man do?
Probably good.
I think
the
man
dry
can
sense
do
of humor.
anything.
Yeah.
I genuinely think he can do anything.
Genius.
Although he did hurt his hand while we were making that game.
We all hurt our hands.
We all hurt our hands playing that game.
I think all of our hands are never going to be the same.
Like, I just remember him, like, it being like, sorry, Mr. Sakurai, I can't write these emails right now because his hand is injured from testing, and be like, whoa, okay.
He did have it, like, wrapped in a thing for a while. I've never seen that. Like, in meetings, it was like, bound. It was like a mitt.
You get an insurance policy AR card or something in those packs, you know?
But that is a man who leaves it all on the field, man. I mean, he put it all out there for Uprising. Like, the fact that he injured himself testing it, that is one of the coolest, most dedicated bosses I've ever had.
I mean, I worked with Mr. Sakurai on Smash Ultimate, and it was probably the most like challenging point in my life that I've ever had to deal with. Because, you know, as you know, he is so dedicated. He is such a perfectionist. He has such a high bar and a high standard that he expects all of you, the people that are working with him, to rise to that level. But sometimes it feels impossible because he's a genius that's at a 1 million, and I'm just me at like 10. So
you're more than 10. I wouldn't say that the gulf is
like 20.
12. And so sometimes you feel like the pressure of like, gosh, I can never match him where he is. How was your experience working with him, and did you feel that kind of pressure as well?
I definitely felt pressure on it, especially because it was a Sakurai game. I was lucky that the other writer on it, the lead on it, was Ann Lin, and she had a ton of experience, and she's incredible. And we also had great translators working with us. So, I think that Sakurai put a lot of trust in us. That said, like, he was never scary. It was never like, oh no, we're scared, but it was definitely like, oh, you really go down to like the deepest of the deepest little screws and cogs in this, and want us to keep up with that. So it wasn't that like we were worried he was going to disapprove of us. It was more like we need to pay attention to everything. Because also he would like change tiny things, and he'd let us know, but like a tiny change, even in writing jokes, can sometimes change something else down the line. Like if he added a new line here that needs this, XYZ, that might change something in another chapter where a person references something else that has changed now. So we really had to stay on our toes. That said, he was always super nice to us, but he definitely had high expectations and definitely let us know he had high expectations.
Yeah, that was my experience as well. He's not mean.
Right.
You kind of put those expectations on yourself because you are around him so much. You're like, oh, this is where I need to be all the time.
Yeah.
And the detail part of it, that's such a good point, because he is, I don't even know how he does it, but maybe that's just his, like, he was just this way where he is so good at looking at the big picture, looking at all the tiny details, and like somehow figuring out in a big brain way how it all works together.
Yeah.
But it's a lot for like a normal person like us I think to keep track of and stuff too. So
yeah, and also like a lot of the stuff in those games he has planned out long beforehand.
Yes.
Like sometimes you can play a Sakurai game and be like, man, did you just have a lot of ideas while you were making this and just added stuff in? But I was lucky enough where we were localizing Icarus as he was making Icarus.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
But like, I remember very, very, very early on when we barely even had any levels to play with, like seeing all these design documents where it's like, we're going to have these idols, we're going to do this, there's going to be this difficulty thing, you're going to be able to like bet this and, have challenge this way. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think we're going to do all of this, right? And then all of that was in there.
Incredible.
Why do you think video game comedies are so rare? And it's cool that Nintendo has been responsible for so many of them that are out there. Do you think it's just something that people don't think people want? Or again, is it such a limited skill set? Like there's so few people out there who can do that, who are currently working. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I think it's a combination of factors. I think that, and you do have some major video game comedies. Like I would argue that the Grand Theft Auto series is largely more comedy than drama. Like a lot of the big story beats in those games are dramatic, but like when you turn on the radio and they play a commercial, it's comedy. When you have interaction, like half of the missions are comedies. The problem is, I think that a lot of people, when they write video games, and I mean the actual writing, I don't mean the developing or programming or planning, sometimes assume they're funny. I think this was a problem more in the past, maybe from the 70s until the early 2000s, when a lot of these video game designers had watched a lot of Monty Python and were kind of like, we got it, we know what we're doing. And I also think that, sometimes the people think that the audience wants, a very serious game. People sometimes think, they want like their like action hero that has a big sword and they're going for it. And they might want some like one-liners, but they don't want jokes. They want some like badass one-liners. So I think sometimes that invades it too. Like I'm a fan of the Gears of War games. I think they're good games. I think for a while, every game sounded like those games, where every character that was even trying to say a joke was more just like, uh-oh, here come the nasties. Like, it was kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of like low-level lame. A lot of like, that just happened. Another problem, I think that, and Nintendo doesn't have this as much, I think because Nintendo has its way of making games a little more set, is that for certain games, the writing changes a lot. And, it's almost, for certain games, closer to writing for a theme park ride than it might be writing a movie. Where, like, imagine if someone came to you and said, okay, we have this awesome roller coaster and it goes underwater at a certain point and it does this cool flip, and we want you to have someone speaking to the writer the whole time, and we want you to build a story around that. And that's a little different than starting with the story and then building the ride, if that makes sense. So sometimes that can make it a little hard because you're kind of, I don't want to say shoehorning jokes in, but you're kind of fitting jokes in after the structure itself already exists, which can be a little difficult. But I do think it's getting better. Like, if you play games like Thank Goodness You're Here, that's an amazing comedy game.
Love that game.
It's so, that might be to me the funniest game ever made. And that's because they figured out a way to tie the gameplay straight into the jokes. So it never felt like one was disconnected from the other. I think they're getting better at it. So I think for a while it was bad just because they weren't hiring professionals to do it. A lot of people were, it suffered from sort of that syndrome of a lot of the characters sounding the same. So like every single character in a game had the same sense of humor, which actually makes everyone less funny because they're less interesting. I do think it's getting better though.
How do you feel about sort of Nintendo's transition from like obviously writing comedy into games and now like writing stuff that's Nintendo oriented into movies. Like now they have like the Super Mario movie, and they're gonna make another one of those. And
Yeah.
like there's kind of a connectivity between the universes, obviously, but a very different approach I would expect from like writing a movie and writing a game.
Totally. But but what I liked the most about the Super Mario Brothers movie was it felt like I was watching the game. Like it felt like you could feel Miyamoto in there being like, no, it's the game. Like we don't, like, to Nintendo's credit and to I think DreamWorks' credit, I want to say, they, there wasn't an origin story. There wasn't a chosen one. There wasn't a reason that the super mushroom makes you big. They were just like, people know it. It's there. Let's go. And I think that actually made making it funny easier because it trusted in the game itself. So as opposed to a lot of video game movies where it's almost like it has to justify its own existence, what I liked about the Mario Brothers movie is that it was like, this exists. We'll make it as good as possible. Nobody needs to be convinced to be watching this. And that allowed them to really make it as fun and as funny as possible. And I think that because Mario was already an upbeat series that was kind of goofy, like Mario is, 99% more comedy than it is drama at all times. And so I think it was also easy to fit in there. Like, it's much easier to hear a joke coming from Mario or Donkey Kong than it might be when we see the Legend of Zelda movie. Like, I don't know if a joke coming out of Link's mouth is going to play as well as coming out of Luigi's mouth.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of Zelda, one of the things that you talk about as one of your big achievements at Nintendo in the book is being responsible for naming Groose from Zelda Skyward Sword.
Yeah.
And you kind of, I don't know, you kind of like, oh, it's in the grand scheme, like, is it that cool? I think it's really,
really
cool.
One
So,
of the most memorable characters in that game too.
Well done.
I was
But
very
you talk
proud of
you talk about these meetings, kind of like everybody come and contribute. Can you just tell us about like what those meetings were like, and kind of like what's the vibe to get the best ideas that you guys are actually going to end up using?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, like, having worked in television since then, those meetings were the most like writing for television, where you were sitting in a room with a bunch of really smart, really fun people, being like, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So essentially, when, you're making a game, like I said, there's so many elements to add. Imagine a new Animal Crossing game. This wasn't the case when I was there, but imagine there's a new Animal Crossing game and you have to name everybody. You have to name all the new, items you're finding. You have to even make a list of what even real dinosaurs and real fish you want in there. And that all has to be done. And sometimes Japan's doing that. Sometimes that's all NCL. Sometimes they want help from, they want input from NOA and NOE. And, sometimes it's just like, we came up with this monster. You guys name it. Or even systems. Like, there were meetings about naming the Wii U, which we don't have to get into. And
Fail! Just kidding.
I don't want to go too beneath the surface, but I really think that was a situation of NOA saying, we don't know about Wii U, and NCL being like, we think Wii U's gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, I remember these conversations.
But again, I'm not calling anybody out. But you'd have these meetings where it's like, you would get all these translators and all these writers into a room, basically anyone who is not in an emergency scenario where something was like about to launch and needed to be fixed right now. And you would spend 2 or 3 hours with, characters on projection screens and be like, what do we call it? And someone would be at a whiteboard and you're just shouting out names. And it's so funny and so fun. And, 90% of the time, it's not your idea that's getting in there, but it's more like you're yes-anding each other. It's like, oh, what if we call this? Oh, wait, no. What if we add this to it? Oh, that's great. No, wait, a previous game did this. What if we sort of looks like a guy from a previous game? Is there any connection there? We could do this. And it's really this fun way where you get to like name things. Like you're literally being given parameters of how to name things. Like I say in the book with Groose, when we were naming Skyward Sword characters, they were like, all right, it is sky themed, obviously. And we want everything to evoke birds. And so you're really sitting there and you're like, okay, what is this guy like? All right, he's a jerk and want to name him after a bird. All right, in the book, I go into a little more detail into a small moment of thought, but you're basically like, okay, birds are jerks. Geese are jerks. Bruce is the name of a bad person. Groose. Like, it's sort of like that sort of thought process, but you're doing it for hours and it's so much fun. Like those naming meetings were some of the most fun I had at Nintendo.
Are birds even real? That's something we can also
Are birds even real?
Debate. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was so interested to hear in the book you talk about being part of this really special event that I learned that Krysta was also a part of as well.
Yes.
Which is when they were again moving into the new building,
Oh, yeah.
shutting down the old building.
The paintball.
They had
Paintball
this
game.
big paintball match in the old
Yeah.
building that
Yeah.
again I didn't get to go to. It seemed kind of like out of character for the company to do this, but what was this like to be a part of this? And who was dominating at paintball?
So
Not me.
I'm guessing it was Reggie. Everyone had masks on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was the same case for you, but like for I think they just spread everyone out to anywhere. Like you were randomized almost.
Yes,
so it
you
wasn't
were.
like Treehouse versus marketing versus HR versus legal. And legal would have destroyed all of us. But like
We would have to gang up against legal to destroy them because they're
Finally.
too powerful.
Chance for revenge.
but like so I had just started there a week or two before, and
Me too.
as a kid I had seen VHS videos and magazine profiles where they showed the inside of Nintendo of America. And I had never been in that building, and that building had already been, everyone was already out. And so they were like, when they announced this paintball match where it's like, one last time, everyone gets to go into the old building and we're going to do a paintball match. I was like, well, first of all, I really want to fit in here. I want to do a good job. And second of all, I really want to see that building. That's a building I've been seeing since I was a kid, and I'm at Nintendo. And so I signed up for it, never having played paintball before. As like a kid in like, Boy Scouts, I had maybe fired a gun once at like a range type thing, but I'd never been in some sort of competitive shooting situation.
It's kind of intense. It's more intense than you think it is. Like it sounds like, oh, it's just like water guns in like in an empty. No, it was like Call of Duty level, like 360 no scope. You're getting hell, and they hurt.
They hurt.
Those
They
paintballs are not. They're not like they're painful. They left
Yeah.
welts like all over me, and I was in like the gear.
I was in the gear. I was in the gear too, and it somehow like even though I was
Penetrated
wearing
the gear. Yeah,
I was wearing protection for my gear.
yeah.
That the gear over my gear did not protect my gear.
No.
Like I got hit so hard, so fast that like I crumpled
Read the
to
book
the
for more
ground.
background on that.
I like army crawled away.
Yes.
Yeah.
I crawled away. And they still had like a little bit of like one or two cubicles there and a couple
Yes.
boxes, and I like crawled towards the box
I know,
and just
me
tried
too.
to hide it. Like I was just like, oh no!
Channel your inner Solid Snake and just get under the box. No,
Just waiting.
People turn into different people in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like at the Hunger Games
Lord of
where
the
like,
Flies.
where you're like a really nice person normally, and then they put you in paintball gear and you're like, must kill. And
Survival
you,
instincts.
you become like a different person. And they're just like kill shotting. I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. This is
They
so
were working out
intense.
some stuff. Like some of those departments were working things out.
Yeah.
Like it was
There's
terrifying.
It was a little terrifying, yes. But I was like, okay, this is a vibe. Interesting.
Yeah.
On kind of a more serious note, something that we talk about often on our podcast is this experience that we had of going into Nintendo, which was our dream job, as it was for you.
Yeah.
And kind of what are the realities of
Mhm.
achieving your dream job and making that, again, the thing that you were doing day to day over the course of many years. I'm just curious, like, what was that experience like for you? And is there any advice you would give to somebody who's like, oh, my dream is this and it's going to be like this?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned in my book, like someone was like vaguely, playfully hazing me on my first day, and that like threw me out. Like getting shot with Nerf darts when someone was just being friendly. Like I think the advice I would put is, one, if you do get the job, don't put the weight of 1,000 suns on it.
Right.
Because you will come into it so seriously and so nervous that anything will throw you off immediately, which happened to me. I was able to recover from it and everything's fine, but it was definitely like, don't come into it being like, I have entered literal heaven. Nothing wrong will ever happen ever again. It's still a job. And even, as you guys know, like it's Nintendo, but it's still a job. You're still getting emails where you're like, I don't want to do this. Or like, wait, we just wrote that. We have to change the whole thing? Come on. And like, it's a job, and sometimes people have to deal with brusque people in other departments, or not everyone, not every person there in Nintendo is their dream job. They might just be a business person who happens to work at Nintendo. I think it's almost like you have to remember the reality that it is an actual place, and that the other people there are actually working there as well. And not everyone can coddle you or baby you. And sometimes you are going to be bummed out. Sometimes you are going to be disappointed. There were, I think, like 1 or 2 projects that I was like, I'd love to work on that. And they were like, you're still pretty new here. We're going to make sure. Like, I was lucky I got put on Icarus. And I think the only reason I was because I had a comedy background to be put on a game that was that important to the company. But like, there are projects I wish I had worked on, or like in projects I worked on that I was like, come on, man, give me the big stuff. Like, I enjoyed localizing Mario Party 9, but it wasn't a lift.
I enjoyed launching Mario Party 9, but
handed it right off. Yeah.
Pack and ship, as they say.
But it is still a job. So you have to remember it's a job, and you're going to have bad days at that job. You're going to have days where you don't want to be there, even though it's really cool. Or you're, going to have a day where especially because you're working with NCL, where they're on an entirely different time zone. So there's a lot of hurry up and waiting, where you're like, okay, they desperately want our answer. We've given them the answer. Now we need to wait 12 hours to see what they say.
Yeah.
It's still a place of work, and there can still be problems. I would say the one thing that's almost specific to Nintendo is that, and you folks might have experienced this as well, but especially in the Treehouse, is whatever job you have is probably the job you're going to have for a very long time there. There's not a lot of room to grow. And the reason for that isn't necessarily a negative. It's because people don't leave because it's so nice. It's so nice that more people, I mean, we left, the 3 of us left, but like overall people stay there a long time. Yeah. They work there a long time. For a lot of people, that is their dream job and their last job. But it also means that like, if you are hyper ambitious and you want to become like the next Nate Baldorf, that might not necessarily be in the cards, even if you're an amazing worker who spends 20 years there. I mean, they'll pay you more every year. It's not like you're locked in at your initial salary. They're very, they were generous to me, but it is a place where you have to be sure that is the job you want, because it's not necessarily a place that's going to be like, I don't know, give you a different job after you have it.
Yeah, very, very interesting environment at Nintendo, where there was so many people with this incredible longevity. Where like, if you were at Nintendo for 10 years, you were still considered newish.
Yeah.
You know, like I was there for almost 14. Kit was there for almost 13. And, we were working with people that have been there for upwards of like 30, 35, 40 years. And that was not super rare,
Yeah.
Which was a very interesting experience, like being kind of arm in arm with those kinds of people that have that type of longevity. It is a very interesting company where, and I really saw this a lot after I left, where I was like, oh man, Nintendo is really a company that hones you in a very Nintendo specific way. Like you get shaped into a Nintendo shaped cog that can fit into the Nintendo machine. But if you try to fit your Nintendo cog into other machines, like you kind of don't. And so I had to like relearn a whole bunch of stuff afterwards. I'm like, oh, I got to do this a different way now. And same with you, you left the company. Do you kind of feel that way too, where it was like, oh, now I'm like kind of doing something a lot differently than I was for the, the years I spent at Nintendo?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nintendo was a place that felt very safe. And it's not like the other places I worked were aggressively mean or anything, but Nintendo was a place where it felt like unless you did something aggressively wrong, you were not going to get laid off. You're probably not going to get fired. It wasn't, we weren't checking the news. And that's unique for a video game company, and was unique even back then for a video game company, to not be like, all right, we finished this game. If it doesn't perform well, are we all out of a job now? And you can take that safety for granted. It can be very easy to be like, oh, any job, regardless of how I perform, as long as I'm not the biggest a-hole on earth, I'll be okay. Like, when I moved to television, a lot of those shows are on 13-week cycles, where every 13 weeks they are allowed to let you go. And it's not done out of malice. It's more just like the way your contract's set up is like, okay, we're going to review how you're doing. And if you're not up to snuff, we'll let you go. And that is a lot of fear. And that can build in a lot of fear, even in positive environments when you're not sure where you stand. Or, if I was working on a Nintendo game and it didn't perform well, it wouldn't be the end of it. If I was working on a TV show and did not get jokes on for 3 or 4 weeks, I would be sweating bullets. And so I definitely do miss that sense of safety that it provided and structure. Like Nintendo is a safe company, and it's structured. It knows what it wants you to do. Like you were saying, like it tells you what it wants you to do. Yeah. It's a great company to like, I don't know. It's a great company because it knows what it wants out of you. But when you go to other companies, you're like, oh, I need to be a little more proactive. I need to figure out how I fit in here.
Right, totally. What made you want to leave Nintendo?
A comedy was starting to take off for me. And, Nintendo had been very generous with allowing me to take some time off here or there. Like, they let me take a week off to write for the ESPN Awards with Seth Meyers. But the work was getting to a level where I knew that it had not caused a conflict. But I could feel that there was going to be a certain point where it would probably be like, hey, we can't just give you time off when you need it to do something fun. And nor did I want to let the company down that way. I didn't want to become the employee that slowly, like, I don't know, slow burn quits or slow burn gives up on it or seems like I don't care, because I really care about the place. I care about the place now, even that I've been gone for over 10 years. And I got an opportunity from IGN to like lead up this entirely new vertical that they wanted comedy for. And it was the first opportunity I'd been given in my life to just do comedy, to just write and produce comedy, period. It was about video games, but it wasn't secondary. It wasn't part of the role. It was the role. And it kind of felt like it was the natural progression for me, which is weird because most people would desperately rather go from IGN to Nintendo than from Nintendo to IGN. But in this instance, it felt like, okay, I'm being given an opportunity to run my own little web show. I'm going to have like a team of camera operators and a control room. It really felt like a chance to grow. And that's probably the reason I left.
As we are recording this today, we're exactly 2 weeks from the launch of the Switch 2.
Yeah!
Would love to hear what you think. Do you have one pre-ordered? What games are you interested in?
I have one pre-ordered. I also, earlier today, pre-ordered the GameCube controller.
Nice.
I have, right now I've got the Mario Kart bundle pre-ordered. I think I'm going to I have another game pre-ordered as well. I forget what, because I think I did that thing you do when a game launches where you're like, I'm going to get the thing I want, and then I have to add something else.
Right.
I can't just have one game.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for it. I know that I know that it's kind of more like a phone upgrade than it necessarily is like a new console like it was back in the day. But I don't care. It's a new Nintendo system. I'm so excited for it.
Totally. Us too. I think we're living the highs and lows of that launch because obviously, it's been super exciting to kind of experience a Nintendo hardware launch for the first time on the outside of Nintendo. So now we get to get surprised and get disappointed and get mad and then get happy again.
Scream, drop the price into the void.
Yeah. We really we've been on the roller coaster with everyone else. And it's really fun. It's actually experiencing a launch in this way is so cool. And I feel like a lot of people kind of like what you're saying, like, oh my gosh, they much rather be inside Nintendo when something launches. But I'm like, no,
you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. I was there for 3DS. I had to demonstrate at I think it was either GDC or the New York City event. I had to be one of the people in one of those shirts demoing the 3DS.
To your body?
No, but it was strapped to the podium. So they had podium set around and it was locked or tethered to the podium.
Yeah.
I think someone could have stole it, but they had to steal the podium itself.
They would chain that thing up with a literal lock.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly. To your point, it's not fun when you're inside the company trying to launch
so much.
It's exhausting, and you have to stand in front of a chained system, and you've been traveling. We were talking to somebody else on the events team. They were like, we have been on the road for 50 consecutive days with Switch 2. And I was like, oh,
that's a lot.
That's a lot of days. So it has been just so fun and exciting, highs and lows of experiencing it as just like a normal fan, so it's been pretty cool.
It's kind of nice as a normal fan to experience it and to not have to go to the events and not be asked the same question 30 times.
Totally. And not be scared that you're going to say something wrong. Get quoted.
Oh my God.
That was the worst.
Yeah. How does this 3D work?
Stereoscopic or something?
Nintendo magic.
Yeah. That was always a safe answer, actually.
Yeah, Nintendo Magic,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
that Nintendo magic.
I'm not going to tell you how the
Very
magic-
earnestly say that, and that'll be okay. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I was so interested in, it was like a no-duh thing when I was talking to somebody in localization, like, all those like system menus and stuff like that, like we have to localize that too. And it's like, well, maybe that's even like more dry than Mario Party 9 is like, the system menu of,
settings
on a piece of hardware.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everything
that's
gets
the thing.
localized. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah.
Right. We have seen, and you note it in your book as well, this kind of connection that Nintendo has with kind of the comedy community. And we saw that, Reggie was a guest on Jimmy Fallon so many times for so long. Like, it seems like there's a thing there where there is a lot of overlap, but just like a lot of love for Nintendo from the comedy community. Like, do you think there could be more of a pipeline, like that you were kind of, very early on of like, comedy writers going to work on games and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Nintendo, a lot of that comes from the fact that, like, Nintendo was really one of the, like, I guess still is kind of always like the king of couch co-op. And I know people who would go on the road and you would play, even before the Switch, but definitely on Switch, like Mario Kart. You'd just go on the road and play Mario Kart 8 on the Switch. You'd go on there was so much about the road that even before I was at Nintendo, where I would just people would bring video games with them and you'd play them. And this was before the Steam Deck or people had like gaming laptops and, people had a PSP and we all know. But I mean, really, I think it was, one, it's something you grow up with. And I think a lot of comedians, not all, but a lot are often very childish still at heart and very playful. And Nintendo games have always been very playful. And it's just something that kind of is always with you, I mean, there are so many moments where I bonded with comedians in a hotel room where we had nothing to do but, put on a game, put on GoldenEye, in whether it be a legal or non-legal process of putting on GoldenEye. But I mean, still, those experiences make you very pro Nintendo.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, your book is out. What else should people know about it?
You can get it anywhere that books are available. So you can get it Amazon, but, you can also get it at independent bookstores, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, your local library. If you request they get it, they'll get it for you. The book is available digital, hardcover, and also the audiobook. I read the audiobook. If you have enjoyed any of the jokes I've told so far, I get to read it in my own joke cadence, and you can get that both wherever you get audiobooks. Also, if you're a Spotify premium listener, I believe it is free with that service.
Oh,
wow.
Very nice.
I think it's always fun to listen to the writer read the book. Reggie did the same thing with his book where he read the book, and just having your voice say the words that you've written is really special. So yeah, I always encourage people to get the audiobook. Get both. Get all the books.
Get both.
Get your hard copy, get your, audiobook, get all of it.
As many as you can. I owe a lot of money to bad people. So as many versions as you can get. If you get all three, I will sign the back of your phone if you get the digital version. Whatever you want, I will do.
This is a desperate man, people.
This is a desperate person.
Help him out.
Well, even though we were 10 years late in doing it, we're so happy that we could have this conversation with you, Mike.
Yeah.
Same. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. We just love spending time with you. We should definitely do this again.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it in person or something. And it's going to be great. But I think you have such a great background. You've done so much for Nintendo. And I hope that people learned a little bit about all the work that you did on the localization team, like localizing some of the most funniest, fantastic games that were on a Nintendo platform. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.